The London Mayor has said some protesters against ultra-low emission expansion in London are far-right, COVID or vaccine deniers. Here's a clip of Sadiq Khan's comments at People's Question Time event where demonstrators gathered outside.
What I find unacceptable, though, is some of those who've got legitimate objections joining hands with some of those outside who are part of a far-right group who are... Some of those outside, some of those, let's be frank, let's call a spade a spade. Some of those outside are part of the far right, some are COVID deniers, some are vaccine deniers, and some are Tories.
Vaccine deniers and Tories in the same sentence. Charming. So is Khan right? I don't think so. Or is this an unfair characterisation of the protesters? Joining me is London Assembly member Susan Hall, who is the leader of the City Hall Conservatives. Now, I've got on Susan today because she has been very vocal about Sadiq Khan's an outburst, really. What do you make of it all?
Well, I mean, this is a new low for him, isn't it? I was sitting one along from him. He was absolutely furious that anybody should question what he was saying and what he was doing. But to resort to calling us all far right, and he lumped the Tories in with that, which was unacceptable. But people were there justifiably complaining about the ULEZ. I've been out on the doorsteps today talking to people, and some people are almost in tears because they cannot afford to replace their cars. And I live in Harrow, so we're right on the outskirts of London, and they just don't know what they're going to do. And he just doesn't listen. He's not interested in what anybody says. As you know, he did a consultation which showed that people didn't want it, but he'd actually ordered the cameras before the consultation had finished. So, you know, it was a predetermination there. I mean, he was clearly going to go ahead, whatever happened.
Susan, I think it sounds like he's getting more desperate, and that's why he's throwing around these kind of accusations. But for the purpose of balance, can you tell me that there weren't any far-right protesters there, that there weren't any COVID vaccine deniers at this protest?
I didn't see any inside the hall. I got to the event long before it started. I was there at 6, and there were some people milling around outside. When colleagues came in later, I said, is there anybody outside? And somebody was saying that they were making vehicles honk as they went by if they agreed with them that the ULEZ should be stopped. So I didn't actually see any. There may have been a couple. I honestly don't know. I was inside.
But that's the thing. The purpose of what he said, in my opinion, was to blanket anyone who disagreed with him with the same brush, tar everyone with the same brush. But this is a trend that we're seeing in politics in general, isn't it? I mean, Nicola Sturgeon has said similar things about people who disagreed with her about her gender recognition reform bill. Is this just a way for people with progressive politics, left-wing politics, to discredit anyone who disagrees with them?
Well, I think it is. I mean, it's very unfortunate. We've seen Angela Rayner refer to Tories as scum, and apparently that's quite a common term. I remember once delivering leaflets and said it no scum Tory here. I can honestly say I've never heard any of my colleagues use any of those words to people that are in other parties. There's no need. We've got different political views, and we should have every right to say them. But I get on just as well with the leaders of the other groups in City Hall as I do with my own members. Clearly, we've got policy disagreements, but, you know, behaviour like this from Khan was just dreadful. And he was furious because he was being shouted at, and he just doesn't like that. He's very thin-skinned.
It seems that Sadiq Khan likes to exaggerate. He was on another radio station last week talking about the fact that no one can get their hands on tomatoes in this country, and I believe he was blaming Brexit for that. It does seem as though he's getting perhaps a little more extreme in his rhetoric. Do you think he's starting to get a bit worried about the next election?
I think he's suddenly, well, I think people around him are telling him that this Brexit, beg your pardon, this ULEZ could be the sort of Margaret Thatcher's poll tax. you know, there's a total denial from him that people are as against it as they are. And I assure you, Emily, live in the outskirts of London and people are desperate because they don't know how they're going to manage. People are angry, are furious because they've bothered to fill in the forms to say, no, don't do it. And he's just not listening to anybody.
Well, I know it's going to cost people hundreds of pounds a month just to essentially get into their car and drive anywhere for many, many people. Thank you very much, Susan, for joining us to discuss that. Susan Hall, who is the leader of the City Hall Conservatives at the London Assembly. Thank you very much for your time. Now, we reached out to Sadiq for a comment, but he wasn't available. However, a spokesperson for the Mayor of London said the Mayor stands by his decision to call out the vile messages on display outside the event in Ealing. Those who came to protest included people displaying Nazi symbols and spreading vaccine conspiracy theories. Unfortunately, there is a small group who appear to have latched on to ULEZ expansion to try to play on people's concerns and push their own agenda. The Mayor urges Londoners to look at the facts about ULEZ, to read the evidence about the damage air pollution is doing to people's health, and to be cautious about those who are clearly scaremongering and spreading misinformation. Whether in London or in any other part of the country, dangerous conspiracy theories and abhorrent far-right activity should always be condemned in the strongest possible terms. Well, there you go. Let me know what you think about Sadiq Khan's comments. I think he was essentially calling people who are against ULEZ all of these nasty names, and I personally don't think that's on.